Merrick Garland was pressed on this, the Attorney General of the United States, yesterday. Let's play a little bit of how he responded to whether or not, or where he is on the possibility of charging Donald Trump.
No person is above the law in this country. Nothing stops us.
Even a former president.
I don't know how to, maybe I'll say that again. No person is above the law in this country. I can't say it any more clearly than that.
That's a really notable soundbite from him saying, the reporter's like trying to follow up and he's like, no, just let me get this out and say this and make this clear. I mean, I'm assuming he will be watching very closely tonight.
He will be watching closely, but it's also worth remembering how the Justice Department works. Merrick Garland is not going to wake up 5 months from now or 6 months from now and say, we're going to indict Donald Trump. There's going to be a process. There will be line investigators. There will be the FBI investigating Donald Trump. There will be a review process of people deciding whether or not an indictment is warranted, and then it will move up the chain to Merrick Garland. He is not going to make this decision in a vacuum. The question that so many people have is how aggressively are they conducting the investigation now that will lead to that decision several months from now? And that question, I think, remains somewhat mysterious.
I agree with you, and I appreciate all of that, and that the DOJ has to take its time to build its case. All due respect to Merrick Garland, that is not true. Donald Trump, today, where we sit right now, is above the law. Donald Trump has been charged with nothing. One legal watchdog has said that there are at least 48 potential crimes committed by Donald Trump over the course of his presidency or while he was campaigning. He has not been charged for any allegations of sexual assault, using the government to punish his opponents, anything in connection with January 6th, meddling in elections. And look, I'll be super hyper uber fair, nor has Bill Clinton. He is not alone as being a powerful man who has been thus far above the law. I'm not a legal analyst nor a scholar of the law. I'm a normal person. And I think if you're a normal person with some reason, you think, well, Donald Trump has been above the law. It's been 18 months since the insurrection.
I mean, what Garland was addressing is this idea that had been reported out that somehow the OLC opinion that said a president's beyond prosecution could be extended. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I know it's emotionally unsatisfying for people, but it is good for Merrick Garland to be taking extra steps to try to depoliticize the Justice Department after a period of politicization. That's good for the Republic. What's not good, and what I think he was trying to clear up yesterday importantly, is equal justice under law, even for ex-presidents.
Right.
This is an unprecedented situation.
Right.
And I do think the committee seems to have urged on and created more urgency around the DOJ. But he was trying to be very clear yesterday with regard to at least criminal liability for trying to overturn an election.
But even Donald Trump knows. Donald Trump is telling people in his inner circle he wants to run again.
This is the point.
Because he knows the presidency will be a shield from indictments and jail time.
What he's thinking is that he can do brush back pitch if he runs and say, look, I'm engaged in the political process again. Therefore, any indictments are therefore political.
In a new piece, my next guest makes a case in defense of the Justice Department. Lawfare Editor-in-Chief Benjamin Wittes joins me now. Benjamin, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Listen, you've seen and heard all the criticism. Too slow. People probably are adding on to the Mueller probe, I would say, and their lack of patience and what's going on. But do you think that they are moving too slow, that they are dragging their feet, waiting on the committee, as some people believe?
I don't. I think they have moved actually remarkably quickly in general. When you look at the scope and scale of the investigation since January 6th, 2021, we've had more than 850 indictments. A surprising number of them have been of people who are accused of very violent, very bad offenses. They have moved up the hierarchy of potential defendants relatively quickly. They've moved up to seditious conspiracy cases, and they are now knocking at the door of the political echelon. And if we had been sitting here on January 7th, and you had said, what would an aggressive investigation look like of this? I would have described something exactly like that as the best case scenario for what an investigation might look like.
Now, it's true, though, that they've moved up the hierarchy in terms of the charges. But they've been criticized, especially from Andrew Weissman, Deputy Special Prosecutor in the Russia investigation, where he talks about this sort of bottom up approach, right? We often hear the colloquial term about you go after the big fish, and who's the big fish? Is the approach of those 800 plus indictments, and they are pretty low level actors compared to, of course, the President of the United States, is that approach flawed?
No, I don't think it is. Look, I agree with Andrew Weissman that if the Justice Department is not today looking at the broad range of activity that Donald Trump engaged in and others engaged in the wake of the election leading up to January 6th, that would look like it has a certain institutional blinders on. But in fact, we know that the Justice Department has executed search warrants against John Eastman, one of the people who was helping the president plot the fake electors.
That Eastman memo we
the
all
Eastman
read about.
memo. There's been a search warrant executed against Eastman. There's been a search warrant executed against Jeffrey Clark, the Justice Department official who Trump tried to install at as the acting attorney general.
But these were quite recent, and they were after at least testimony about either in the committee.
So first of all, recent activity is a sign that the investigation is alive and doing its work, right? If you said there's been no recent activity, that's what would bother me. Moreover, the Justice Department, gets the benefit of a lot of different inputs, right? It gets the benefit of all the bottoms-up activity that it's engaged in. As they flip defendants, they get cooperation. As they bring in new defendants, they get, new allegations come in, right? But they also get the benefit of journalism. There's been a lot of journalism. They get the benefit of the work of the committee. The committee's conducted 1,000+ interviews, and so I think it's not a bug. It's a feature that the investigation appears to be assimilating inputs from all over the place. One important point about this is not like Watergate, where you have a relatively discrete fact pattern, right? I don't know how many total defendants there were in Watergate. Watergate, by the way, took 5 years to prosecute the whole thing. This is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people scattered all over the country. Even the activity that the committee is looking at, if you think about it geographically, it involves people all over the place.
Yeah.
This is going to take a while.
Well, speaking of hundreds and hundreds of people, I mean, I was a line career prosecutor. Everyone keeps talking about Attorney General Merrick Garland, who I know you know well, but at the end of the day, it's the career prosecutors who are going to be building these cases and presenting it to the Attorney General in some form or fashion. What do you make of the perception, though, that people have that the Attorney General or the DOJ more broadly is playing catch up? And I ask this specifically because there were these letters to the committee, and the committee wasn't handing over information to DOJ.
Yeah, so first of all, in a situation in which the committee is doing a top-down investigation, the committee starts with the question, hey, what can we say about political accountability and Donald Trump, right? They get to start with the king. They interview everybody around the king. They interview everybody around. That's not the way you conduct a criminal investigation, as you know. At the criminal investigation, you do it maybe not from the very bottom up, but you're going to start with the people below. It is not surprising to me at all that the committee gets to some people starting at the top before you get them coming up from the bottom. To me, the question is the following. As you look at the way the investigation progresses, is it moving up? Is there pressure from the cases they are making on the next rung up the ladder? Right now, it seems to me there is a lot. It's a very active investigation crossing a lot of different territory, both legally and factually. And so as long as that's the case, I'm not going to sit here and worry that the subpoena that went out last week didn't go out last month.